Hello everyone, welcome and welcome back to my channel. I am Lizzie and today we're going to make a bias cut dress together. This dress features a boat neckline, long bell sleeve and a back yoke. There's no zipper, no buttons. Actually there's no clothes at all. It's designed to simply slip on. The pattern comes with 6 variations, 3 different lengths and 2 sleeve options. It's designed to be cut on the bias grain, which means at a 45-degree angle to the fabric selvage. This technique takes the advantage of the fabric's natural stretch on the bias, and the result is that the dress gently hugs the waist, skims over the hips, and then flows down like a soft, subtle waterfall. To make this dress in the mini length like this red version, you will need 1.8 meters of fabric that is 1.4 meters wide, 2 meters of the interfacing tape, matching thread, a sewing machine, and a serger. If you don't have a serger, that's totally fine. A zigzag stitch on the sewing machine can do the job. You will also need scissors and the printed pattern I'm using in this tutorial. I'll link it down in the description box below. With all that said, let's get started. So, which types of fabrics are suitable for this project? Naturally, you might think of satin, crepe, anything soft, fluted, and drapey. But let's take a closer look at some actual fabrics here. I have several types of satin ranging from polyester to silk. We're going to do a simple test to check how well they stretch on the bias grain. First, find a corner of the fabric and then hold it at a 45-degree angle to the selvage and gently stretch it. The more flexibility you feel, the more drape and fluidity the fabric will have once it is cut on the bias. The second test is just as easy. Just fold a corner of the fabric along the bias grain and then let it hang freely. As you can see, a suitable fabric will naturally form soft waves, while stiffer fabric will hang straight and show very little drape. Since this is a bias cut dress, most of the pieces need to be placed at a 45-degree angle to the fabric edge. The only exception is the sleeves, which stay on the straight grain. You should have 5 pieces in total: the front, the back yoke, the sleeves, and the bias binding for the neckline. Before we start sewing, let's do a little bit of preparation. Bias cut fabrics love to stretch, so we really need to stabilize a few areas, especially the neckline and the back yoke seam, to keep the dress from losing its shape while we sew. For this, I'm using interfacing tape, this one also called stay tape. First, I measure the neckline and the back yoke seam directly on the pattern for both the front and the back. Then I fuse the tape to the wrong side of the fabric using the heat from my ironing machine. You can see how those edges are now nice and stable. See, they won't stretch anymore. Now let's move on to the front piece and take care of the 2 bust darts. I mark the dart legs, bring them together and pin all the way to the tip. Then I sew from the wide end toward the point, stopping right at the tip. Instead of backstitching, I like to leave a long thread tail about 10 centimeters and tie a couple of small knots. It just keeps the dart looks clean and smooth. Finally, give the darts good press, pressing them downwards, and we're ready for the next step. Take the yoke piece and back piece and line them up along the yoke seam with the wrong sides facing each other. We're going to use a French seam here to keep everything nice and clean on the inside. Start by finding the center notch and pinning there first, then work your way out, matching and pinning the rest of the seam. Once everything is lined up, sew your first stitch at 0.7 cm seam allowance. Just a quick note here, the pattern seam allowance is 1.5 cm, so with the French seam method, we would end up with a knit final seam of about 0.7 cm. Now trim the excess seam allowance down to about 0.3 cm and then take it to the ironing board. Press the seam allowance to one side and then fold the fabric so one layer flips over the other and the raw edge is fully enclosed between the 2 layers. Keep everything on the wrong side. Sew your second stitch at 0.7 cm from the folded edge. Give it a good press and your French seam is done. Next, lay the front piece front side up and place the back piece on top of it, again with the wrong side touching. Line everything up at the shoulder seams and the side seams and pin those edges together. Make sure that you match all of the notches. Bias cut edges can shift and stretch very easily, so it's worth taking your time here to match the notches. We finished the shoulder seam and the side seams using the French seam technique again. So first, sew at 0.7 cm. Then trim down the excess seam allowance. Press it to one side. Then flip the fabric so the wrong sides are together. Press again and then sew a second line at 0.7 cm to enclose the raw edge. The last step for the bodice is finishing the neckline. Take your bias binding and join the two short ends together, right sides facing. Then sew them together at a 1 cm seam allowance, and then press the seam allowance open. Next, fold the binding in half lengthwise, with the right side facing out, and then press to create a nice crease. Now, with right sides together, align the raw edge of the binding with the raw edge of the neckline. Pin them in place, making sure that the binding is evenly distributed all the way around, and then sew it through the neckline at a 1 cm seam allowance. After that, flip the binding toward the seam allowance and then understitch it. It means sewing about 0.2 cm away from the seam. This helps the binding roll neatly to the inside. Trim down the excess seam allowance here. Be careful not to cut into the binding itself. Finally, fold the binding over the wrong side of the garment. From the outside, you shouldn't see any of the previous seams. With the wrong side facing up, stitch the binding down about 1 cm from the edge. And that's it. This is how it looks from the wrong side and the right side. Okay, so now that the bodice is finished, we're going to move on to preparing the sleeves before attaching them to the bodice. With wrong sides facing each other, line up the sleeve seam edges and pin them in place. For this seam, we once again using a French seam. Now let's attach the sleeves to the bodice. Start by turning the bodice wrong side out and then keep the sleeves right side out. Slip the sleeve into the bodice like this. Line everything up at the armhole, matching the sleeve seam with the underarm point. Then find the front and the back notches and match them to the corresponding notches on the bodice. Pin all the way around the armhole. Bring it to the sew machine and then sew at 1 cm seam allowance. At the sleeve cup, you notice a little bit of extra fabric. This is meant to be eased in gently. That little bit of ease gonna help the sleeve follow the natural curve of the shoulder. Once the seam is sewn, finish the raw edge with a serger. And if you don't have one, no worries at all. A zigzag stitch on the sew machine works perfectly fine here. Press the seam allowance toward the bodice. We're almost there, guys. The only thing left is to hem the dress and the sleeve hem. In this tutorial, I will use the baby hem roll technique to finish these hemlines. So fold the edge toward the wrong side and stitch about 2 to 3 mm from the folded edge. Next, carefully trim down the excess seam allowance as close to the stitching line as possible. Take your time here. Cutting slowly really helps avoid accidentally snipping into the fabric underneath. Now, roll the hem up again toward the wrong side to create a very small fold. With the wrong hem facing you, stitch another straight line directly on top of the first one. Give it a nice press, and there you have it. Very simple. Just like that, the dress is officially finished. This is kind of a project that you can absolutely make last minute. Unless you're working with silk satin, which can be a little bit slippery, it's very achievable even for beginners. And the result is incredibly satisfying. So I hope you give it a try. If you do make one and decide to share it on the social media, don't forget to tag me so I can see your Maya dress. I'm so curious to see which version you would choose. And that's it for today's tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe for more sewing content like this. I see you in the next one. Bye!